we spend so much energy, so much brain, so many brain cells thinking about things and thinking about potential outcomes and possible outcomes and who might have said this or might have said that or how the situation may turn out. And we really have no idea. And we spend so much time doing that. But what if we took that same energy and we focused that energy on accomplishing our goals? Or we focus that energy on doing what it is we want to do, the things we love, the things that give us joy, the things that bring us peace. Like, what are those things? And we take that energy from overthinking and we put it into those things. The older I get, the more I realize what I don't know and the fact that I don't have all the answers. But there's actually power in that. Okay. So with overthinking, don't feel like you have to know it all. Don't feel like you cannot take action or do things until you have it all figured out. Because sometimes you just got to jump. Are you an overthinker? Are you somebody that typically overanalyzes a situation? Maybe it's something that might have happened in the past and you continue to think about it. Or maybe it's some situation that's coming up in the future and you're overanalyzing and thinking a lot about it and maybe spending just way too much time on it than really you should. Well, if that's the case, I get it. I've been an overthinker for most of my life. So when we think about the definition of what overthinking is, the definition, I'm just going to read it here. It says to think about something and analyze it in a way that is more harmful than helpful. So overthinking is something that typically a lot of people with introverted personalities can deal with. And so how do we deal with it? How do we manage it? And how do we control it and learn to balance it in our day-to-day lives? That's what we're going to be talking about today on Quiet Voice, Fearless Mind. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Quiet Voice, Fearless Mind, where we help introverts and aspiring leaders to reach their full potential. My name is Terrence Lee, aka the Introvert Leader. Welcome to the show. So overthinking is something that a lot of people struggle with and a lot of people deal with. And I've been having a lot of conversations recently with people that talk about it, where there might be something that they want to do. There might be something that they want to branch off and try some new endeavor. It may be some business. It may be something at work they want to do. It might be something in their personal life, in their dating life or whatever the case might be. But they'll overthink through a situation, and I've been having a lot of these conversations here recently with people that just overthink, and I can truly sympathize and I can understand because I've been that way for so long myself. One of the things that I love about this show is that I don't just come on these episodes and always have all the answers. Sometimes it'll be a situation or a topic I'm talking about that I continue to work through myself. And this is one of those, so I consider myself to be a chronic overthinker. But I will say there are some tips and some different things that I've learned through reading, that I've learned through practice that have really helped me out a lot. And so I hope that today's episode, as we get into those tips and talk about those things, you'll find yourself starting to take some of those things in and truly just, find hope in knowing that you're not alone with overthinking and there are ways you can actually manage it and balance it. Okay. So, with that said, we're going to get into this, and I want to give a really quick story because I think this plays a lot into this topic when we think about what overthinking can do to us and the path it can lead us down, where we end up in this maze of our thoughts that we just can't seem to get out of. So last year, I was in a 5K race that I signed up for with my family. And it was one of the scariest days that I have had recently in my life. And let me explain. So we were in this 5K race. And so it was me and my wife, my daughter, and my son. And, my wife and my daughter, they don't really run like that. So they were going to just kind of walk the 5K. But my son, he's competitive. I mean, he's 7, but 7 going on 17, right? So he was like, Dad, I want to run with you. So I'm like, all right, son, let's do this, right? So we get up to start the race. and the siren goes off. And the thing about my son is fast. Like, he's fast. So I'm thinking we're just gonna, kind of jog this thing out. We're gonna stay around the same pace. And I told him before we started, like, all right, Amari, just stick with me, and we're good. And so as soon as the siren started, he took off. Like, when I say he took off, like full speed, but it's because there were other people in front, and they took off, right? And again, he's very competitive. I'm very competitive too, by the way. I just wasn't trying to be competitive that day. So anyway, he like takes off in a sprint, right? So I take off in a sprint, and I'm trying to keep up with him, and he's running and everything like that. And eventually he got past me a little bit. He did. Like, there were a lot of people in the race, and so he was ahead of me. And then there were just so many people, and I like lost track of him for a second. And then what was crazy was, within probably a minute or two of the race, I looked up to, where he was, because I was able to see him. He wasn't so far ahead that I couldn't see him, but it got to a point where I was having trouble seeing him due to all the people that were there. And on top of that, the course we were on, there were a lot of turns. It was kind of like just a different path, the way that we were running and everything. And so you would turn a corner, turn another corner. And so you didn't have direct line of sight to all the people in front of you. Long story short, it got to a point where I was racing, and I looked up and I realized I did not see Amari. And I'm running, and at this point now, like, I'm running faster because I'm like, where is he? And I'm calling out his name. I'm trying to see, like, where is he? And I didn't see him. And it got very scary when we got to a straightaway, and it was a straightaway where you could really see kind of everyone that was in front of you. And I'm running and I'm calling his name. I'm like, Amari, Amari, and I didn't see him anywhere. So I freaked out. I talked to, there were some police along the side of the race route. And so, I told them, it's like, hey, I'm looking for my son. He's wearing, this color shirt, this color shorts, everything like that, gave the description. And, I stopped running at that point because I'm just trying to find him. And then, of course, call my wife, like, hey, have you seen Amari? Because they were like at this point way in the back and everything behind where we were. She hadn't seen him. The police, they're looking, they hadn't seen him or anything like that. So my mind starts going crazy. Like, I'm thinking of all kind of scenarios, right? Because this is like at a public park type of situation. So, there were other people there, right? So I'm like, did something happen to him? Like, what is going on? Where is he at? Like, my mind literally went into all kind of different scenarios, and it was a terrifying feeling. It really was. So, long story short, fast forward, and eventually I'm continuing to walk the path. I'm not even running anymore at this point. I'm just like, I can't even think about anything else. So I'm totally thrown off. And I turn back, and he's with my wife and my daughter, and they're walking up toward me. And I started feeling like tears flowing down. Like, I was choked up, like I wanted to, I was like upset with him because I had told him, like, Amari, stick with me. Like, so I felt away, but I also at the same time was so happy to see him. And I just felt so blessed that he was good, because when I tell you my mind went somewhere else and I didn't know what had happened to him, I really felt that. So I say all that to say that this situation happened, and my mind went into this completely different direction of all kind of scenarios and things that could have happened to my son. And it made me terrified, like terrified in that moment. And you might have done something like that before. You might have been in that kind of a situation where something is going on in your life, and it just feels like this is the worst thing ever, and I don't know what's going to happen. And you think about all of these negative outcomes. You think about all of these things that could go wrong. You think about all these things that could just take you down and take you out, right? And that's what I felt that day. And so, if you've ever had that happen, we're going to talk today about how to manage that, how to control that, because overthinking can be something that can be crippling. It can really be crippling. And it's not that all introverts are overthinkers, and it's not that all extroverts are not overthinkers. And so, with a lot of these topics and things we talk about, a lot of what it is that people with introverted personalities may tend to do these things, but it doesn't mean that just because you're an introvert listening to this, you overthink. And I totally understand and I get that. But if you're somebody that does, then pay close attention, because hopefully these things we're going to talk about can help you out. And so if you have a situation like the one I just described, you'll know how to manage those feelings and manage those thoughts, and how to truly put yourself at ease and at peace in those situations. So it's not that you will just never be worried about anything. That's not what I'm saying. It's not that you'll never have those kind of thoughts, but you'll at least be able to try to manage them and try to get through those situations a little better.
Introverts are too quiet and too weak to lead. Have you ever heard this before? Well, my name is Terrence, and for years as an introvert, I didn't think I had what it took to be a leader. What I learned was being an introvert is my superpower. If you want to learn how to have success as an introvert, then go to quietvoicefearlessleader.com to learn more.
So the first tip with helping to manage and control overthinking is to realize that the worst case scenario rarely plays out. Okay. The worst case scenario rarely plays out. So think about flying on a plane. I've never really been the type that was afraid of flying, but I know people that do. It's interesting. I've had relatives that literally have never been on airplanes before, that their entire life. I've had coworkers where we had to travel for work, and one particular guy I'm thinking of, and I remember when it was time to take off, he put his head like down in his lap and covered his eyes. Like, it was a real fear. He had a serious fear of flying. And he, sat next to one of our other coworkers on the flight and had to be like comforted and stuff. I mean, it was this whole thing. This was several years ago. But in his mind, that was a real fear, right? Like, he really thought something could happen. And here's the thing. I mean, do planes ever crash? Yeah, planes have crashed before. But what is the likelihood of that happening? Well, the likelihood is relatively low. Now, somebody that has a true fear of that, their mind might go into a realm where they're constantly thinking about it happening. But the reality of the thought is that the chances of it are very rare. So a lot of times we'll overthink situations because we're focused on the worst case scenario. If I try to do this new thing, this new endeavor, if I try to get out of my comfort zone and do something I've never done before, I could completely fail. I could completely fall on my face. I could, all of these things could happen. And our mind goes to the negative, or goes to what could happen that's wrong. But the reality is, with a lot of these things that we overthink about, the worst case rarely happens. I mean, and even if a bad case or something happens that we would deem to be negative, like let's say we try something and we don't do good at it. Well, at the end of the day, it's a lesson, right? When we try things and they don't work out the way we thought, it's a lesson. So even that's not bad. So the worst case rarely happens. And what we should try to do is flip our mindset to thinking about the best case scenario as opposed to the worst case. So another thing with overthinking is to realize that our overthinking can lead to inaction. It can lead to inaction. So do you remember your first crush? If you're listening to this right now, do you remember the first person that you just had a crush on? And I don't know how you were. For me, I was too nervous to talk to my crush. So when I was in the 5th grade, there was this girl in my Sunday school. At the time, we were living in California, and we would go to Sunday school, every Sunday. And I will never forget being there and the first time that this one particular girl walked into that class. And this was around that time, I'm fifth grade. So I'm about 11 years old. And so I'm starting to notice girls, girls are starting to notice me a little bit, although I was very awkward. I was tall for my age, had big feet, had started to get, a few pimples here and there, things like that. So very awkward. And this particular girl, man, I mean, it's like she would walk in the room, and when she would walk in, like the Sunday school teacher was talking, I couldn't even hear what she was saying because I was just looking at her. Um, and it's like that puppy love, right? Like fifth grade, that age and everything. And here's what's crazy. I was so nervous to talk to her that I thought her name was Lauren because I had heard the name, like the teacher said that name one Sunday or something like that. So I just assumed that was her name. I was too nervous to actually just walk up to her and like ask her name. Like, hey, so what's your name? Such and such, right? I wouldn't do it. And what's funny is I ended up getting ready to move. My dad moved us around a lot. He was an accountant. And one of the last Sundays when we were about to move, by this point, I had been in Sunday school with this girl for like, over a year. And I found out that wasn't even her real name. Her real name was something else, which, I won't say on the podcast because maybe she'll see this one day. But anyway, um, so I found out she had a whole different name. I would go to Sunday school with this girl every single Sunday, never say a single word to her or anything. And I procrastinated. I never talked to her. And next thing I knew, I looked up and we were moving. And I was like, never going to see her again. And I was devastated. I was devastated about this girl that I had never talked to or never dated or anything. But anyway, yeah, so it was like a whole thing. But here's the point. I procrastinated. I didn't take any action. I never even talked to her. And how many times in life do we do that? How many times in life is there something that we want, or there's something that, we're eyeing it, but at the end of the day, we're not taking any action. We might have some goal, we might have some dream, we might have something that we truly want to go after, but because we talk ourselves out of it, because we say, well, I don't know how that's going to go. In my particular case back then, I was looking at it like, well, what if she just doesn't like me? What if she says no? What if I go up and introduce myself and she's like, go away? Like I didn't know what was going to happen. But again, back to the previous point, I let my mind focus on all of the negative, right? And a lot of times that's what we can do. So we've really got to be careful with this because when we don't take action, when we procrastinate, we can truly miss out on all the things in life that could be there for us. All right. So with all that said, though, I'm just going to, throw out, I mean, it all ended up working out. I got my beautiful wife and my family. So it's all good. Shout out to my crush, though. If you do end up ever seeing this episode, yeah, I had a crush on you. What was that? Over 25 years ago, but I'm not going to drop any names. So it's all good. So the next thing is to realize that there is a difference between critical thinking and overthinking. Okay. So it's not that being a deep thinker, being somebody whose mind wanders is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to think. And a lot of people with introverted personalities tend to be very deep thinkers. And so if we think about critical thinking versus overthinking, I think the best scenario is when you think about critical thinking, think about the scenario of if you got a offer for a new career, right? So you're thinking about going into this new role in your career, or maybe even just changing fields completely. And a lot of people, they would get an offer that's making more money, and they would just say, oh, well, I'm going to get paid more money. So I'm going to go do this over here, right? But somebody that thinks about it critically, they're going to probably ask a lot of follow on questions, and they're going to think through a lot of other things. So, yeah, this new role is making more money, but do I have to commute? Maybe I was working remote and now this new job making more money. I'm going to have to drive into an office and I don't feel like doing that. Or in this new role, am I going to have good management? Or am I going to be making more money, but I don't get along with my management and I'm in a toxic work environment? Is this new role the kind of work I even want to do? Is it the kind of work where when I start doing it within the first month of being on this job, I'm going to be ready to go because I hate doing what I'm doing, even though it's more money, right? So these are all questions that you think through critically. So it makes sense to think about these things and ask those kind of questions. So there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that is a very healthy thing to do. And we should do that when we're making decisions in life. Now, what is overthinking? Overthinking is there's this job or there's this career or something that I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about it and I'm playing out these scenarios that I'm making up in my head. And next thing I know, a week has gone by and I'm still thinking about it. 2 weeks have gone by and I'm still thinking about it. I'm going through all of these scenarios, but I'm not taking action. I'm just making up potential scenarios, potential things that may never even come to pass. I'm thinking through these things in my mind, right? So that's the difference with critical thinking versus overthinking. Critical thinking is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But overthinking, we have to make sure we understand and know that line and know that difference. And once we delineate it and we see, hey, I'm overthinking right now, I'm beyond the point of thinking critically, then we need to identify that and realize we can change our path and change our course and try to just focus on critical thinking as opposed to overthinking. So the next thing is to realize that there can be a good outcome in our situations. There can be a good outcome. I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is as opposed to us focusing on what could go wrong and focusing on the negative of things, we want to focus on the positive, right? So, several years ago, you might be familiar with The Secret. It was a huge, book and movie series, and it talked about just the power of manifestation and how thoughts become things and all of that, right? And I'll be honest, like when it came out, I kind of thought it was a little scamish. I was like, okay, thoughts become things, like whatever. I thought it wasn't really for me at the time. But it's interesting as I've gotten older and I go back and I revisit it, I do understand the concepts and I understand what they were getting at in that because I've seen it play out in my life. I mean, I have literally seen where I will have a thought about something and I'm thinking about it in a bad way. I'm like, oh, I don't want to get in a car wreck today. Or, oh, I don't want this to happen. Oh, this meeting that I'm about to lead, I don't want to mess up my presentation. And my mind would think through all of those things. And then lo and behold, I end up doing the thing I didn't want to happen. But I think it's because my mind was so focused on that particular outcome, right? But what if we flip it? What if when you have a presentation at work, or what if when you're about to have a conversation with somebody for the first time and you're used to feeling nervous in new conversations, but you say to yourself, this is going to be a great conversation. I cannot wait to meet this person. This presentation at work is going to go great. Man, I cannot wait to just kill it today. And you start thinking through things from that lens as opposed to overthinking about what could go wrong. When you do that, it's interesting what happens. I mean, again, I didn't really believe in this stuff before, but the whole just, thoughts become things, really focusing on your words and your mind and what you're thinking about. It does make a huge difference. It really does. So, just remembering that a good outcome can happen too. It can, you know overthinking on the negative of what could potentially happen, it doesn't help us. It ultimately doesn't help us. So try to focus on the positive and remember that good can always happen too. So the last thing that we should focus on when it comes to overthinking is to realize that life is short. I know it sounds cliche. I know people say it all the time, but it really is. It's one reason I end every show, every episode with the phrase, we have one life, make it count, because it's the reality. And it goes by fast. I mean, it really does. Like, it's crazy to me when I look up at, how old I am now. I mean, I'm 42 years old with a family, living life. And it has gone by like blink of an eye. I mean, man, I remember being a kid sitting with my, bowl of cereal on Saturday mornings watching cartoons. I remember that like it was yesterday. And you blink and your life is moving. So we get one life. And when we overthink and when we don't take action or we don't press forward with the things that we desire to do, we don't use the gifts that we were given. When we do those things, we're going to end up with regret. And we don't want that. I don't know about you. I mean, when I'm looking back, when I'm older and looking back over my life, I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to have anything that I didn't try or I didn't experience that I could have. And because I overthought through a situation or overthought through several situations, I didn't make the most of the gifts I was given and the opportunities I was given. So I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen to you. So if you're listening to this, I would highly encourage you, if there is anything that you are wanting to do, if there's anything you've been scared about, if there's anything that for some reason, whenever you feel that tug to push forward and to do it, something holds you back, I would say just jump out there. Jump out there. Like sometimes it's best to just jump without the parachute, right? Like you just take off. You don't even have a safety net. You don't necessarily know how things are going to go. You don't have all the answers, but you just jump anyway. And you would be amazed at sometimes the way things will work out. And that's where faith comes in. That's where faith comes in. I know that, you might not be listening to this and be spiritual. Um, Me being a Christian and my faith as I've been growing in it, I realize that I'm just not always going to have the answers. I'm not always going to have the understanding. Um, there's a lot that I am learning about faith in general. And there's a lot that I'm learning about what I don't know. That's what I'll say. The older I get, the more I realize what I don't know and the fact that I don't have all the answers. But there's actually power in that. Okay. So with overthinking, don't feel like you have to know it all. Don't feel like you cannot take action or do things until you have it all figured out. Because sometimes you just got to jump. So, listen, I hope you truly enjoyed the episode. This was a topic that is one that I continue to deal with myself, as I said in the beginning. So, I hope you heard something that you truly can implement and you can find power in, because overthinking is something that it's not that we'll never do it. It's not that it'll just never happen in our lives again, but there are ways to manage it and ways to control it. And so I hope there are ways that you can do that, and you heard something that you'll be able to implement. So I did want to end with a quote, as we always do. So this particular quote is from Amit Ray, and it says, "Stop overthinking. Put more energy on what you really want to do." Stop overthinking. Put more energy on what you really want to do. All right. And I just think that's so simple, but so key, right? Because we spend so much energy, so many brain cells thinking about things and thinking about potential outcomes and possible outcomes and who might have said this or might have said that, or how the situation may turn out, and we really have no idea. And we spend so much time doing that. But what if we took that same energy and we focused that energy on accomplishing our goals? Or we focus that energy on doing what it is we want to do, the things we love, the things that give us joy, the things that bring us peace. Like, what are those things? And we take that energy from overthinking and we put it into those things, right? It just leads to a much better life. I mean, when I choose to do that, I find myself so much happier. So, I hope that that quote, you can begin to live that out. Spend more time doing the things you love. I mean, it's not, again, that we'll never overthink, but when you find yourself doing that, try to take that energy and put it into something that you love to do. So until the next time, remember, There's only one you, and there's only one life. So make it count. God bless.